Good morning. Welcome to the third in a series of Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program webinars from the Cook County Assessor's Office. My name is Scott Smith. I'm the Chief Communications Officer with the office, and we've got a bunch of folks from our office here today to talk to you about this exciting new program. We have three folks. First, our main panelist is Vincent Waller, who is a Director of Policy here at the Cook County Assessor's Office. We also have with us Michael Piper, who's the Director of Special Properties. He's been focusing a lot on affordable housing and having some great conversations with a lot of folks that are stakeholders in that community. And then finally, Christina Lynch, who is a Director of Legal here at the office. So they'll be on hand to answer any questions that you have. I want to first direct you to the Q&A box. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box. We'll leave the chat for kind of general things, like we'll be sharing some links in there, any kind of forms and stuff that get referenced. You'll see links in there as well. But the Q&A is specifically for questions. So we will take a bunch of these live after the presentation because we assume if you have a question about it, somebody else probably does too. Just to let everyone know, the slides and the recording will be available later on this week. So keep that in mind. We will make these slides available. The other thing I want to let you know about is we do have a dedicated webpage for the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program. So if you go to the Cook County Assessor's website, on the main page, you will see a link to affordable housing programs. And all you need to do is just go right to that page. That allows you to get more information about this special assessment program. It also allows you to start the application that Vince is going to talk about here. So that is your kind of one-stop shop for any information about the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program. You can also see the other webinars that we have available coming up later this month. So today, we will talk with you a little bit about the various issues, and then we will also offer next week a webinar specifically around low affordability communities. And you can register online as you did for this one at that affordable housing webpage that I just dropped into the chat. So finally, last thing to mention here, we do have an FAQ. We've been getting some great questions from these events, and this has really given us good feedback about the things that people are most concerned about. So we're producing an FAQ. We should have that available later this week. If you have signed up for this seminar or for this webinar, you will receive a link to that once it goes live. So keep an eye out for that. And so without any further introduction from me, I'm going to turn it over to Vince.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Scott, for that introduction. As Scott mentioned, my name is Vincent Waller. I'm the Director of Policy here. Scott is our Chief Communications Officer, and he will be monitoring the chat and will moderate the discussion. So if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if I'm too quiet or too loud, just let Scott know and he'll let me know. This program, as Scott mentioned, is being recorded for training purposes. So if you happen to have missed some of these webinars on this list, you can still go back and watch them right now just by going to our webpage where they are listed. So here is the series of webinars that we've been presenting. Today is obviously March 1st, and this is the third of a four-part series. If you were there for the Tuesday, February 15th presentation on Class 9, you know that one has to do with Class 9 applicants. So if your property is located anywhere in Cook County and is now or was recently in the Class 9 program, there are simplified procedures for you to move into this program, the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program, and that webinar helps you navigate the application. Last week, we presented on in-service affordable properties. So if your Cook County property currently already offers affordable housing and you've made substantial improvements to the property since 2015, you may be eligible for the program on that track. And there's a slightly different application process depending on what track you are on. So that webinar is for in-service affordable properties. If you happen to have seen that webinar and you're here today, you're going to notice this one is very similar. Similar but different. So this one is on prospective affordable housing. If your Cook County property offers affordable housing, maybe to some degree or some threshold, but not quite the threshold that is required in this program. Or if you are planning, you're considering renting to eligible households at affordable rents, or you're considering doing some new construction or rehabilitation. In other words, you have a plan in the future to offer affordable housing. This webinar is for you. You may have made substantial improvements to your property at some point, but maybe that was 10 years ago. So you would still need to undergo some new expenditure, in which case, if you're planning to do that, that's what we're going to go over today. Next week will be specifically about low affordability communities. There are multiple tiers in this program, multiple ways to apply. One of them is if you are targeting your construction project in a low affordability community, that webinar will be for you. And those are special reductions targeted at defined geographic areas that we'll go into in more detail next week. So today's agenda is a simple agenda. We're going to go over generally what is the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program and how do you apply as a new applicant on the basis of prospective new construction or rehabilitation. We're going to go over the mechanics of entering into this program. So what is this program? It's created by state statute. It is an exciting new program that provides property tax relief to incentivize the creation, rehabilitation, and maintenance of affordable housing units in Cook County. Property owners who apply timely can receive yearly reductions in assessed value beginning with the 2022 assessment year. And with respect to the bills you will get in 2023, it's similar to historical Class 9 incentive program. When I say historical, it's just a program that's been around for decades. But this program goes a lot further. It offers more ways to qualify. It offers improved benefits. And we anticipate anyone that would have had interest in that program would have even more interest in this program. So if you are applying on the basis of your Class 9 status, you can apply as a Class 9 applicant. If you are a Class 9 like property, but you're never in Class 9 and you have plans to enter into this program, you can enter as a new applicant. Scott mentioned that we have an affordable housing page on the website. So here's a handy graphic that you can see to navigate your way from our website to the affordable housing page. It's under all forms and tools. Go to that drop down, click affordable housing, and that will get you to the page. It is a paperless application process. Historically, this has been a very paper heavy office, and it still is to some degree, but we are working to modernize things as part of many of the initiatives of this administration. We're proud that we were able to convert this to a paperless, at least not a hard copy paper process. So when you get to the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program page, you will scroll down. You'll see that we'll have language in there, these particular webinar offerings and other information. But you'll also see these two big blue boxes, big blue square boxes, and those are the applications. The applications were designed similar to, you're going to hear a lot about Class 9 if you get involved in this program, because we modeled this program in many ways after Class 9. Our Class 9 audience was comfortable with the existing application process to some degree, and we wanted to keep what worked. So part one is essentially you saying, here's my plan, here's what I intend to do. And then you go out and you do it. And then you file part two of the application saying this has been done. So that's why it's broken up into part one and part two in a nutshell. Some folks, some developers may find that helps with financing. If they wanted to submit their plans as part of the part one application, it's almost functions as a letter of intent, so to speak. But regardless of your status, all applicants must complete parts 1 and 2 in order to be approved into the program. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to click that part 1 application, that left blue box, and then you are going to see the screen. It's going to prompt you to enter your name and enter your email address. When you enter that, you hit submit, you're going to get an email with an access code that you'll be prompted to enter back on this screen. Save that access code email. It's very important. Flag it, star it, bookmark it. That is your ticket back to your application. Sometimes we start an application, life happens, we walk away, we come back. Maybe someone has X'd out of our box, and it can be frustrating that we've lost our progress. Thankfully, with one of the advantages of the DocuSign application, it allows you to save a application in progress. But how do you navigate back there? Well, through that access code email. So you can re-access a partially or fully completed application and return to your session by clicking the return to session button in that email. So when you go into part one, now you're looking at the application itself. The application is a couple of pages long. I wouldn't say it's about 5 pages. The very first section is basis for application. So if you are the intended audience today, you're not going to click the first box, currently in good standing in class 9. You're not going to click the second box, class 9 status revoked after January 1st. You're simply going to click the new applicant box. You are then going to get a drop down, and it's going to ask you, well, what kind of new applicant are you? Is it a building-based subsidy? Is it a tenant-based subsidy? Is it no subsidy? You may be wondering, well, what is a building-based subsidy? It's a subsidy that's attached to the building. So for example, if you are LIHTC, if you're receiving the federal low-income housing tax credit, you would check off building-based subsidy. Tenant-based subsidy would be something like housing choice vouchers, Section 8. So if the benefit inures directly to the residents, that is a tenant-based subsidy, you click tenant-based subsidy. Some folks are what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. So if you are a landlord that just charges really reasonable rents, you may not be involved in any subsidy programs. You're just simply naturally occurring affordable housing, or that is your plan to create naturally affordable housing. You're going to click no subsidy. And then you will move on to the basic information section. Basic information section is pretty straightforward. It's going to ask you, have you applied for an application to the LIHTC program as part of the same statute that it created the affordable housing program. There's a feature that lets you certify yourself as LIHTC. That's a separate application. If you've submitted that, presumably you've been certified as LIHTC. So you would just say yes. If it then goes on to say, if yes, what is your control number? We realize not everybody may have their control number, so do not worry about that. If you don't have it, you can just leave it blank. Going right along, item number 2, project name. So that's the name by which you identify the project. It's not necessarily a registered DBA. It's not necessarily the name of your company. It's the name of your projects. Then you're going to list your PIN. We understand that some projects encompass multiple PINs. If you have multiple PINs, just simply list them on a separate document. On the right-hand side of the screen here, you're seeing that paperclip icon. You're going to see those throughout this document. Those are simply attachment icons. You click that. It's going to prompt you to access your hard drive computer, and then simply select your list of pins to upload that document. Depending on what type of subsidy you're receiving, you may be receiving a subsidy through IDA or through City of Chicago. If so, you would have the applicable identification numbers, and we would expect you to list those. For item 8, obviously, if you're in this audience, you're a part of our intended audience today, you're not applying on the basis of class 9, you're simply going to select no to item number 8 and move along. Next, you're going to select your tier of reduction. So there are 3 different choices, and those choices are up to you. We do anticipate that if somebody in this audience was really interested in low affordability community projects, you'd be attending next week's webinar. So for the most part, this audience, we're expecting that you'd be interested in either what we call the 15% tier or the 35% tier. And those simply are your commitments. And I don't want to say simply, I mean, it's an important commitment. You're committing to providing at least a certain threshold of affordable units for at least 10 years. And depending on what you plan, you may plan to provide, 20% of your units. You've got a 10-unit building, and you're going to have 2 of those be affordable units. That's 20%. And if you're going to plan to maintain that for 10 years, you're going to click that first box. If you let's say you've got 4 units out of your 10 that you're going to make affordable units, you're going to commit to keep those affordable. You would check the second box. Obviously, the more burden you take on in terms of providing more affordable housing, the more benefits you're going to get in terms of your tax benefit. So again, there are 3 tiers of affordability. Here you see our shorthand. The 15% tier is in quotes, obviously, because that's referring to, you could be providing 33% affordable units, and you'd still be in the 15% tier. So it's at least 15%. So it's less than 35% of dwelling units maintained as affordable units. 35 and above, that's 35% tier. And then low affordability communities is its own tier, in which you are providing at least 20% or greater of your dwelling units in a low affordability community. So when we say affordable unit, what do we mean? It's a unit that satisfies the relevant share of affordability based on maximum rent and maximum income limits. So the idea is you cannot charge too much rent, and for these affordable units, you're not going to give them to households that are wealthy, right? I mean, the idea is to provide affordable housing for those in need. AMI is a familiar term for those in the industry, but it means the area median income. So in other words, we're saying this is the percentage of area median income for the geographic area in which the multifamily building is located. And these are numbers determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and published annually by the Illinois Housing Development Authority, or IDA. So these are the current numbers. These are subject to change. Inflation happens. These numbers are regularly revised just about annually. And the numbers you're looking at are based on the most recent IDA determinations available. If you go on their website, there's a section on rental housing and for property managers, and that's where you will find this information listed. So in other words, if you are one of your affordable units is a 2-bedroom, you cannot charge more than the amount listed here, $1,258. If it's $1,500, it's not affordable. Maximum income limits, as we mentioned, you have to offer these to households that are within maximum income limits. Otherwise, it's not really affordable housing. Maximum income limits means the maximum regular income limits for 60% of AMI for the geographic area. These figures, you'll find them in the attachments to the Part 2 application. So you don't have to memorize this, the numbers on this deck. We also do, as Scott mentioned, we're going to put these decks up on the website as we have been doing for the other webinars as well. 15% here in a nutshell. The tax benefit you're getting is 25% reduction in AV, which is a significant benefit. And again, a reason that we are excited about this program, and we're excited that and hopeful that there will be a lot of buy-in into this program. Now, what's the qualifying activity? Obviously, you would have to complete some new construction or rehabilitation on or after 2015. And what kind of reconstruction or rehabilitation? Well, you would need to meet an investment threshold of $8 per square foot. And when we say per square foot, we mean of all the habitable space in the building. So that's your denominator. So if you are, rehabilitating a room, it's your denominator is not the square footage in that room. We're taking the total expenditure, and if we were to divide it by the square footage of all the habitable area in the building, is at $8 at least. It's required to be in order for you to meet the expenditure requirement for the 15% tier. There are term limits. When you opt into this program, it is for 10 years, but you can renew at the end of each 10-year period for a maximum of 2 renewals. So you wouldn't be required to do a whole new expenditure. You could simply renew by, again, recommitting that you're going to continue to provide, that the threshold that you were at initially, right? So if you're providing 2 of your 10 units as affordable units, you're going to continue to do that for an additional 10 years. If that's what you're willing to do, there will be a renewal form that will be coming up pretty soon. If you were in the Class 9 program, which our audience is not, then your term is counted against that. And we go into that in more detail in the past webinars. Minimum building size is 7 units. So this program is geared towards multifamily residential housing. So you can't be a Class 2. You have to be a 7-unit or more property. These numbers again are adjusted for inflation. So the $8 per square foot, that's the current amount. Next year, it would be slightly higher. And the 25% reduction in assessed value is based on post-construction increased value. So you're not getting hit with the full, burden of your improvements in terms of your property tax. 35% here. If I just jump back and forth here, you can see the very little changes. So I'm not going to go over everything else that I just went over. but you can see that the tax benefit is greater. It is 35% instead of 25%. You can see that the investment threshold, the amount that you have to invest, is also greater. It's $12.50 per square foot, and improvement of 2 primary building systems, which is the same with the 15% tier. And again, that $12.50 will go up with inflation. Low affordability communities. This is really an oversimplification. There is a lot of nuance here, but so I don't want to downplay the nuance, but the tax benefit, generally speaking, is a reduction in assessed value equal to a percentage of the difference between the value of the property 1 year before the affordable units are occupied and the post-construction assessed value. That benefit is uploaded, front-loaded, and it's greater in the earlier years, and it tapers off, but it doesn't taper off completely. It will eventually taper down to about a 20% AV reduction. But again, we're going to go into that more detail next week. And the qualifying activity is new construction or rehabilitation, but not anywhere. It has to be within a quote unquote low affordability community, which is a geographically defined area. Moving back to the Part 1 application, next you're going to enter applicant information. Who is the applicant? The applicant is the owner. So the owner, if it's an LLC, you're going to put the LLC name. If it's an individual, put the individual's name, FEIN number, address, city. We've all filled in a form like this before. Contact information, again, straightforward. And if your contact person is the same as your applicants, you're not required to re-enter this information. But if you have, for example, a property manager, if you have an attorney representing you, if you have someone that you would prefer to be the point person, that if we have a question, that's the person that we would reach out to, fill out that person's information here. The note there is modifying the previous section. It's saying you might have multiple owners. If you have a long list of owners, then you can take that list on a separate piece of paper, fill it out, and then attach it. And the attachment link is at the bottom of the page. Next, you're going to put in the PIN numbers. Now, some may ask, okay, well, you just had in the basic information section, you had a PIN number section. Why are we being asked for the PIN numbers here again? Well, some properties are very large, complex properties. Sometimes what one would identify as the PINs of the property aren't necessarily the same thing as the PINs in the project. And also PINs can change. So sometimes between your Part 1 application and your Part 2 application, you may have filed for a division. You may have divided the PINs. So that's why you're going to notice that we do ask for the PINs both on the Part 1 application and the Part 2 application. And if you have a long list of PINs, again, put it on a separate piece of paper and attach it. Basis for special assessments. You're going to have to select new construction or rehabilitation. So if you're planning on taking an empty lot and putting a whole new building, obviously that's new construction. If you are taking an existing property, maybe the property is already has tenants, but you're putting a new roof or you're doing some other kind of major rehabilitation, you would select rehabilitation in that dropdown. Next, description of property prior to rehabilitation. You only have to complete this if you're doing a rehabilitation. If it's new construction, you're not required to complete this section. And you're simply going to give us the information asked for here, the gross living area of the building in square feet, the number of existing dwelling units in the building, number of occupied dwelling units in the building, date on which it became vacant, and other uses if it has any other than residential. Next, you're going to list your proposed dates and projected costs. You are solicited here to upload copies of any code violations, citations for the building, and photos pre-rehab. These are not absolutely required. These are optional, but it does help us understand the before versus the after picture of the status of the building. But again, they're not a statutory requirement, so we're not going to require, if somebody leaves that out, we're not going to reject your Part 1 application. As far as you're going to get a similar question, parallel question on the Part 2 application regarding the post-construction photos and any post-construction code violations, those are required. So it is required on the back end. It's not absolutely required on the front end. We're also going to ask you to list your proposed dates and projected costs. These are obviously estimates subject to change. We're just trying to get a snapshot of your plans. What date do you expect the new construction or rehabilitation to commence? What date do you expect it to be done? How many units are you going to have after you're done, et cetera. Renovation of primary building systems. So as part of your plan, we want to understand what primary building systems are being rehabilitated. Now, if the basis is new construction, you can skip this section. But for major rehabilitation, we need to know what is being rehabilitated. What is a primary building system? So we have a list here, and again, this list is reproduced and included in the attachment documents to the Part 2 application. But major means major. It's electrical, heating, plumbing. So heating doesn't mean that you put in you cleaned off one of the burners. It means you put in a new HVAC unit. Electrical, did you put in a whole new wiring system for your lighting? Roofing, did you install a new roof? Floors, walls, and ceilings. Did you put in all new carpeting? Elevators, did you install some new elevators? Did you rebuild the machine room controls? Energy conservation improvements, did you install solar? Did you put in Energy Star appliances? So we are looking for major work, a major overhaul of primary building systems. At the end of the Part 1 application, you're solicited to upload additional documentation, such as the deed for the property, your architectural plans, your plat of survey. So gather up those documents, and you would click that attachment icon to attach those documents. Sometimes it's going to say optional in the DocuSign form, and optional for purposes of DocuSign is not necessarily optional for purposes of our application. But we are making these applications somewhat modular for the different audiences that may apply. So if you were a Class 9 applicant, you're not required to give us any of this additional documentation because you already would have given it to us as part of your Class 9 participation. So had we made that a required, then folks from Class 9 would find it frustrating to apply. So that's the reason for the optional that you see there. And then next, you're going to finalize and sign. You're going to check off these 3 boxes to certify that you are, uploading documents that are true and correct and complete and accurate, and certifying that you're going to stay within the income and rent limits that qualify for the program, and consenting to disclosure of this information to us, and consenting for us to use that information for verification purposes. Next, you're going to click sign. Anyone that's used DocuSign, it's a very friendly program. It makes it easy to sign digital documents. And again, if you are, confused, once you've submitted that, like, hey, did this thing really go through? Was it received? You can always go back to that automated email you had received at the start of your application to navigate back to your document and see your completed document. You can see that it was complete. You can see that it was submitted. Next step, well, you've got to do the project now. So you're going to, secure financing. You're going to procure contractors. You're going to do the work, and we expect that our audience here has a lot of expertise in that. But again, this webinar is for prospective properties. We're assuming you haven't done this yet, so there's going to be some delay in time between your Part 1 application and your Part 2 application. Once you've completed your project, you can now complete the Part 2 application. So navigate back to the website, click that second blue box, and we're not going to repeat all the things that we talked about the automated email that you're going to receive, the different sections that you're going to fill out. And I know it may be frustrating sometimes that you feel like I've already given them this information. Why am I giving them a second time? Well, things can change. Your contact person can change. Like as I mentioned, the pins can change. So that's why we do ask you to refill out basic information, applicant information, contact person, property description. Once again, select new construction and rehabilitation. And then you're going to describe the property after the new construction or rehabilitation. So what is the gross area of the building in square feet now? What is the gross living area? How many dwelling units do we have? Are there uses other than residential? If you need to attach a continuation page, you can do that. Next, you're going to list your post-construction rehabilitation dates and costs. So what was the actual dates the construction started? What was the actual date it completed? What was the total expenditure? And then you're going to list the total cost per system component. So this is only required if the basis for eligibility is rehabilitation. You're going to include the total cost and cost per square foot for each system. The per square foot is referring to all habitable space in the building again, so that is your denominator. Next, you're going to upload required documentation. We realize that on the Part 2 application, it does say that not every document needs to be included with the application. And that's one of the common questions that we've received. Well, do we really have to submit everything? We are encouraging folks to submit everything that they can. And by making it somewhat equivocal, I think that gives us a little bit of discretion to possibly approve an application that may not have every last piece of paper. We don't want to make perfection the enemy of good enough. And also, we don't want to have a drastically different process than we did with our Class 9 process. With our Class 9, we didn't always require, every single piece of paper in advance of approval, but we always would say, you are required to maintain this documentation for the entire Class 9 period. So we have a similar approach here, but because this is a paperless process, we do expect that it should be a little bit easier getting all these documents to us. Although generally, yes, if there's a piece of paper that you don't give to us, if there's a certification that is missing, we may or may not still approve your application, but you're still expected to hold on to those documents and produce them for inspection should you be requested to do so from our office. So I'm not going to go through the literal list here, but I'm going to go through the gist of what it is that you should be submitting. We want your proof of written notice to tenants of maximum rent levels. So one of the documents in the Part 2 application, there are multiple supporting documents. One of them is a sample notice, because it is a requirement of, just like it used to be with Class 9, and still is with Class 9, and it is with this program, that you're notifying tenants of their rights under this program. You're going to verify the tenant's participation in an income-based subsidy program, if any. You're going to include a copy of the deed or other evidence of ownership of the property. And then you're going to give us a written statement that the owner has verified and retained documentation of household income for every household occupying an affordable unit. We also want a written statement that the affordable units are comparable to the market rate units in terms of unit type, number of bedrooms per unit, quality of exterior appearance. Why do we have that as a requirement? I mean, well, not only is it a statutory requirement, but again, the goal of this is not to propagate, slumlords, right? We don't want to have low quality housing. We want decent quality, good quality housing. And the idea is that if you've got 10 units, you're not going to give special attention to your non-affordable units compared to your affordable units. So that's why we ask for that statement, but not just the statement, but also just the essence of what you're doing. We want to make sure that that is consistent with the spirit of the statute. We also ask for documentation from the administering agency verifying the owner's participation in a qualifying income-based rental subsidy program, if any. If you are in a program, if you're not, then that's obviously wouldn't exist and wouldn't be required. We ask for a written statement identifying the household income for every household occupying an affordable unit and certifying that the household income does not exceed the maximum income limits allowable for the area in which the residential real property is located. You're almost done. There are two important items left to submit. Number one is the tenant certification of household income. Number two is the rental information / tenant household income report form, or what we sometimes just call a rent roll. And again, we ask for all this information because we want to ensure compliance. If we're giving a significant property tax benefit, there's going to be some reasonable expectations that we're going to have to ensure that we are giving that benefit correctly and to eligible applicants. So first, let's go over the certification of tenant household income. Where do we find that? Well, I mentioned earlier that there's that supplemental documentation at the end of Part 2. So within the Part 2 application, if you scroll to the bottom, you're going to see that affordable housing supplemental documents, a link in blue. Click that link, and you're going to see a document pop up, and it's multiple pages. I've crudely red circled that download icon, so you're going to click that. So now you've got the PDF on your desktop, and it's a fillable PDF. And for each unit, this form needs to be completed. So what is this? What is a certification of tenant household income? it is a way of attesting that what the household income is for each affordable units. So you're going to list the names, you're going to list the sources of income, and the total household income. And then there's a sign off for the tenant and the owner, because we want to trust but verify. And part of that is holding the applicant to these continuing requirements to verify in paper that they are within these income thresholds. This is one of the ways that we have of ensuring that. And this, again, is going to be filled out for each affordable unit and then uploaded along with your Part 2 application. We understand that there may be a scenario where timing-wise, you might not have every last one. You might want to, submit your application. We're not going to just reject your application right away because it's missing a certification, but we would encourage you to get those other certifications to supplement your Part 2 filing as soon as you can, so that we can have a complete Part 2 application. What is household income? What is included? What is not included? So here we have the list of what is included. This is provided in that same list of supplemental documentation, but essentially it is income, wages, salaries, tips, unemployment, workers' compensation, and severance pay, Social Security income, interest and dividends, business income. The one thing that it does not include, and this is a little asterisk under public assistance, is SNAP. So Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program payments are not included. Reimbursement for medical expenses are not included. Any earnings of children under age 18 are not included. I'm not going to go over the whole list here because you can see it. Moving right along. Once you've got those certifications of tenant household income documents put together, scan them and upload them using that paperclip icon here. Or if your tenants were able to sign these digitally, I suppose you could just print them to PDF and upload them. Next, we're going to talk about the rental information tenant household income report form. So essentially it is the rent roll. If you've got 25 units or less, you can use the rent information form that is embedded in Part 2 of the application. And you're going to list all the units, affordable or otherwise. We are asking for info on all units, but obviously we're not asking for the income for the non-affordable units, but we still do want to know the amount of bedrooms, bathrooms, square feet. Remember that all pertains to a couple of things, like are these units comparable in terms of quality? Are these units, and also what is our total square footage of the property, so that we can ensure that we have our denominator for certain aspects of our compliance analysis. Some of these projects are very large, and we've got some large properties that are more than 25 units, and there's some limitations to the DocuSign form. It just really wasn't going to be very workable to do more than 25 rows in the documents. So if you have a property that is more than 25 units, we ask that you download the Excel version of this form, and you can find it on the website. So this is the portion of the website that you would find it at, where it's highlighted in yellow highlight. And when you click that, we've got some questions about that too, because people are asking, like, well, I see that it takes me to a Google document. So how do I download that? I believe we've added some clarifying language on the webpage since then. You can download a Google document by going to File, and then there's a drop down, and I believe it is. I believe there's a download option under File, but that will be. I believe that we have explanatory language on our website for how to download. But you can download that Excel, and I understand that's why we got some questions, because folks are saying, well, I can't upload it if I can't download it, but you are able to download that Excel. And then we also have a sample. So we have highlighted where it says download here. It's the same form, but just with 3 rows completed. So you can see what kinds of information is being solicited by each row. What we like about this form too is it's a way of us having more consistency in our data. So we're gonna go over that form at the end of this presentation, which is coming up soon, and just highlight some rows, and you can see the way it works. Once you have those forms complete, you're going to then upload them by clicking that attachment icon there to upload those documents. And then you're going to finalize and sign the certification section, which is identical to the Part 1 applications certification section. Now you've submitted part one and part two, and you've done your project, and what happens next? Well, we need to process the applications, and we anticipate getting a lot of these, and these are new for the public, and this is a new process for us as well. So we appreciate your patience as these applications are processed. Our staff is going to review these materials to determine eligibility. Then we'll make a determination. Either it was eligible and approved, or not eligible and denied. If it is denied, you're going to receive notice of the deficiencies and reasons why it was denied, and you will have 30 days from the date of that email notification to provide supplemental information. So, maybe the certification wasn't checked, or an important document, we're missing the deed or something. That in that scenario, that's what we would tell you, and you would have an opportunity to cure that issue if that's what the issue is, and in which case you should then be approved. Of course, some folks, if you are a 2-unit building and we tell you we had to deny it because you're not 7 units or less, probably not something that could be cured in 30 days and would then lead to you being denied. There will be annual submittal requirements. The statute provides that the owners are subject to continuing requirements for the duration of the program, and we may annually or periodically verify your compliance. Just going by our historical practice with Class 9, we always had an annual submittal requirement. We anticipate doing the same thing here and having a form that we'll put together before the end of this year for next year and every year that you're in the program. It's likely to be the same as very similar to Class 9. So essentially it'll be a rent roll in your certifications of household income, and a document just saying I have these, I'm maintaining these, and essentially an affidavit or certification, something of that nature. Term limits. So we mentioned that there's a 10-year term of the program with option to renew prior to the expiration of each term. And the statute currently cuts off the program after December 31st, 2027. That doesn't mean that if that statute is never amended or modified, that after 2027, you stop getting these benefits. You would still get the benefits, and you would still have the option to renew if you're already in the program, but you're just going to be a new applicant after 2027. Somebody couldn't come freshly in to get into this program if they weren't already in it, unless that statute changes, which, there's time for that to happen. And again, there's a limit of 3 10-year terms if you are in the 15 or 35% tier. Works a little different with low affordability communities, and we'll go over that next time. So we're getting near the end of this presentation. Scott mentioned the affordable housing inbox. That is the email to that inbox, assessor.affordablehousing@cookcountyisle.gov. When we talk about the deadline to receive the benefit as soon as possible, we've thrown out March 31st. We do hesitate to call that a deadline because the program provides, but we hesitate to call it a deadline, but because the program provides a reduction for AV, we need to apply it before we certify townships to the Board of Review. We certify townships on a rolling basis throughout the year. We're still wrapping up the 2021 assessments and have not yet set the township schedule for 2022. But if we can get an application by the end of March, part 1 and part 2, which probably unlikely for this particular audience if you are looking to have prospective projects, but for those that this would apply to, if you're able to get us your part 1 and part 2 submittals by the end of March, we're confident we can complete review before the townships start closing. For those applications we get after the end of March, we will review it as speedily as possible. But if we have not closed that township, we will apply the reduction before we certify the results to the board. We've already certified the property's township. The reduction could still be applied, but the board would have to do it, and we'll do what we can, including making an assessor's recommendation to the board. But once we certify the township, we can't change the AV to apply the reduction ourselves. Regardless, if your goal is not to get the benefit as soon as possible, then that deadline doesn't really matter in this context, because you'll have ample time to apply in advance of the property tax year for which you seek to reap this benefit. So this is our final slide with just our basic contact information. The thing I'd like to do now is, Scott, if I could stop sharing my screen. Let me see if I can stop sharing so you can share the spreadsheet.
Yep. All right, let's see here.
So what Scott is going to share is that rent roll form.
Oops. There we go.
And one of the nice things that we like about this form, again, is it can make our data a little bit more standardized. So Scott, if you hover over that months vacant column B, and just click one of those boxes there, there's little pop-up icons with text that will explain. So go down to the two, and you see how there's a drop down right there. So you know, obviously you can't just say yes or no. So all of these columns are like that. They limit the inputs to keep the inputs standardized, but what we're seeking is just the basic information about each of these units. And again, the tenant income information is not required if it is not an affordable unit, but if it is an affordable unit, we do need the household income per unit. So this is the form. If you have to take the downloadable version, this is what it would look like. And this is the example version, so you can see what kinds of content we are soliciting for each of the columns. The other follow-up that I want to give, and we can stop sharing this, Scott, thank you, appreciate it. The other follow-up that I want to give is a brief follow-up. We had a question in the first webinar as to whether the benefit inures to a mixed use property. And I said we would come back and answer that. And last week I answered yes. If you have a mixed use property, generally the whole property would get the benefit. There is an additional wrinkle to that. And I'd like to turn it over to either our Director of Legal or our Director of Special Projects to further articulate that.
Christina, if you'd like me to address some of that, and you can fill in the rest of it. I will say, Vince, you're absolutely right. It does apply to the entire building, but the additional wrinkle is that if it must be primarily used for residential purposes, and by primarily we mean at least 60% or more used for residential. So for an example, if you had a property that was 30% of the net rentable area, and that's what we're talking about, the net rentable, was used for commercial or office, or you decided to not use it for anything at all, that's fine. And that's as much as you could use for something other than residential for the entire parcel to be getting the benefit of this. If you used a part of the property that was, let's just say 40% was used for commercial purposes, you still would get the benefit, but only on the residential portion, which was, as you might imagine, a lot more complicated for us to try to parse out, but that's what we would unfortunately have to do. The commercial part would still be assessed as other commercial properties. Did I miss anything, Christina? Vince?
I don't think so, unless there's any other questions about it.
And I think the general idea behind that, because I always like to start with the what's the goal? You know, in our class codes, we do have a mixed use class code, and I think the idea behind that was, you know, that if you have a mom and pop corner store or something, but most of the building is residential, we still class it as a residential building. And in line with that, if that's in that general case, the goal would be to give this benefit to the entire building, including that, you know, small bit of commercial space. But if the commercial portion is dominating the property, then that starts to undermine the point of what we're trying to do here and the benefit that we're trying to give. And if it's, you know, half of your building is devoted to commercial space, and you've got a parking lot that is, you know, servicing commercial customers, then it wouldn't be really right or equitable to pass on a residential, you know, benefit geared towards affordable residential property to this large commercial space.
So we've got a bunch of questions. There's in a couple different categories of questions, I think. So first is some just questions about dates. So specific starting date for the requirement for filing. You did mention about applications, you know, are they processed throughout the year or a specific time? I think what we're emphasizing in terms of dates is March 31st, right? We want to make sure that this information gets on the second installment property tax bill. And that's why March 31st is that date that we really want people to fill out this application. But for folks who are wondering about, you know, whether stuff maybe comes online at a different point in timing, Could one of you maybe sort of speak to post March 31st? Should people fill this out? What does that mean for timing? What does that mean for people receiving the benefit?
And I can take that one if you don't mind. March 31st is really geared towards those that are ready to go. And for today's audience, it's an unlikely date. And March 31st is really our initial date for the initial year. After this year, it's likely to be January 31st, by the end of January. So the idea is if you've completed your project, in November of this year and it's in service, then get your application on file by the end of January of 2023 if you want to see the benefit on your 2023 tax bill in 2024. So really that it's a sort of a rolling deadline in the sense of when do you want to see the benefit? And obviously we need time on our end to process these things to make sure that they are captured in time on our first pass in order to be integrated for the applicable tax year.
Okay. And then we had some questions about the certification of tenant household income form. And I think, Christina, you and I have been talking about that and how we're going to make that available to folks.
Yes. We'll work on making that available on our website.
Yeah, so I think the affordable housing webpage is the place to go for any updates to any information about the program, resources, all that kind of thing. So do make sure to bookmark that or kind of save that in some way. There were some questions about the application of this program. So this is specifically for 7 units and above. Is there maybe somebody can kind of talk to the way in which the law was drafted specific to the policy, why those particular categories of multifamily versus the more residential classifications?
Well, they were intended to be to give property tax incentives for new construction and rehab buildings with 7 or more units. That was the way that the bill was set up. There was a separate program that was carved out for the low-income housing tax credit properties. Those amendments were made to a different provision of the tax code, separate from the programs that we're talking about today with the 3-tier programs we're talking about today. And that program does allow a low-income housing project with 6 units or less to receive not necessarily a reduction, but requires the county assessor to consider the actual or projected net operating income of the property. So there is a program that was carved out by the same legislation that created the 3-tier program, what we're calling the 3-tier program, for properties or for buildings with 6 units or less. I mean, the reason being that these were meant to apply, it was meant to carve out property tax incentive programs for multi-unit residential rental properties, and those for 7 units or more, basically, and anything less is typically considered more of what we would call a class 2, but not necessarily.
Okay. And there were some questions about class 9 specifically. So this is a new program. We're asking people to fill out these applications to make sure that we are collecting information on all those properties. Obviously, we know that we've been improving the level of data and identification of class 9s, but part of the great thing about this program is it's improving our tracking of those properties. For class 9 properties that are sort of already active, do they, once they're in this program, do they get treated kind of differently? Are there things for people to expect if they're used to the class 9 and in this program? How does this change things for those class 9 folks?
And I can quickly answer that. I can tell you that the owners who are already receiving the benefit of the Cook County Class 9 program as of basically of December 31st of last year of 2021 are deemed automatically eligible for one of the programs, whichever one they select of the assessed valuation programs. They can't receive the benefits of both the Class 9 and the new program. They can only receive the one program. So if you're a Class 9 property that applies for one of the special assessment programs, your years in the Class 9 program will count against the remaining years eligible under the statute. So that's the big limitation. And then an owner who had a Class 9 status that was revoked after January 1st of 2017 for whatever reason, as long as they can prove that the revocation was an error and that any deficiencies are cured, the statute allows the assessor's office or gives the assessor's office discretion to deem that owner eligible for one of the new programs.
If I can add to that, Christine, I mean, the major difference in terms of the approach is, just a lot of it's the application process itself.
Correct.
So a lot of the things we went over today would not need to be submitted. So it's a more streamlined process. And I did see it in the Q&A. There's a question about what if you're like well into your second term. So yeah, that could be a scenario where you're 28 years into Class 9. If you decided to opt into this program, you're going to get 2 years of benefit and then you're going to be done. But that's not necessarily a bad thing or inconsistent with the spirit of the statute. The idea is, 28 years ago, you did some kind of expenditure. It's probably time to refurbish that thing again, dust it off in 2 years and do a new expenditure and then come in as a new applicant instead of a Class 9 applicant.
And for folks who are already with Class 9, if they are creating some kind of new rehab, is there a sense of they're kind of restarting the clock in some way? Or we did have a question about somebody who's in year 25.
Right.
Can they do that necessary rehab now and qualify for the full 10 years plus 2 renewals again?
Yes, and it may make more sense for them to do it that way. Just because you're Class 9 doesn't mean that you are required to apply as Class 9. You still have the option of if clicking the box to apply as a new applicant, but the catch is that you have to make a new expenditure.
And
an example of the program, I would say, working exactly the way it was designed to. You keep doing new rehab that it contributes to the development of affordable housing. You keep getting a benefit.
And so Vince, you took people through a bunch of different things that need to happen before at different phases of the application. We do have a part 1 and a part 2. Can you talk a little bit about that approach and what do people get after the part 1 is filled out? Just kind of remind folks of what that process is like, and then what happens with part 2's information.
Part 1, among other things, it gives our office an opportunity to assess whether or not the plans are lined up to qualify. So let's say, again, going back to my example, if somebody is a 3-unit property and they send us their part 1 application and their plan is to keep it a 3-unit property, then we are saving them the time and trouble of going through that and thinking that they're going to get this benefit, because then they can get, they would get rejected at the part 1 stage. So there's no need to move on to part 2. You've got to go back to the drawing board and come up with a better plan. So really that's the point of part 1, is just tell us what your plan is and we can tell you if you're on track to be eligible. But also, it may be helpful if you're getting a approved part 1 application, that may help you to turn around and get the financing that you may need for the project, if that's one of the due diligence submittals that your lender wants to see.
Okay. And for folks who are filling it out on behalf of these forms out on behalf of their clients, that is something that's possible. It's not necessarily that the property owner themselves needs to fill it out. We've kind of made allowances for representatives to fill it out on behalf of their clients.
They can fill it out on behalf of the client, but we do want the project owner to be the one that signs or certifies.
Okay, so that's an important distinction. So the property owner does have to sign it if it's being filled out by a representative.
Correct.
Okay, we did get a question on that, and I think that's on the finalize and sign page. So owner's signature is required. Authorized agent is not enough in that case. Another question we got, should rental information be provided per PIN in a scattered site, multi-building LIHTC scenario?
Yes, I think we need to know which PIN corresponds to which units. So we would ask that be, clarified in whichever way you can clarify that along with your submittals. It just, take an additional piece of paper, say these pins equal these units if you need to.
Okay. And we're obviously not able to provide any kind of conditional approval until these applications are filed. So we, get the information on part one. That is a sort of, knowledge to our office about what's being planned and letting somebody know that they can proceed with part two, correct?
We will approve part one, but as far as if it looks like they've put everything that is supposed to be submitted, as far as like a conditional approval, like I don't know how much specificity we would get back to them. And again, with our historical class 9 process has been, they would, if everything looks like it's in order on part one, it would get approved. But if somebody wanted an affirmative representation from our department that like, it looks like you are on track to have a successful part two, I mean, our requirement was that they would write to us and ask for that, and then we would send that to them. I would imagine it would be similar with this program, that's why we have this inbox, so people can pose questions as the application process goes on. I want to go back to the last question real quick, because I mean, they mentioned scattered site. So like in a scenario where you had multiple pins that correspond to multiple buildings, like I still want to remind folks here that this program is by building. So it would need, if you got 2 different buildings that you want to provide affordable housing in, you would need 2 different projects and you would need 2 different applications. It's always the way it's been done with our class 9, and we weren't anticipating doing it different here. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
And Christina, is there anything else you wanted to add about the sort of conditional approval, that idea of sort of how we talk about deficiencies that an owner might need to address?
Well, we haven't, I mean, I'm in the process of working on something that will be, that we will be sending out to property owners for these properties, but the statute does set out certain requirements of, we requiring our office to notify the owner when the property or whether the property does meet the requirements of the program. If it doesn't, we are required to provide written notice to the owner of those deficiencies and give them 30 days to cure. If they don't cure, or the information that they provide to us is not, sufficient to cure, then we would have to provide a written explanation for denying it.
And are there any penalties for early withdrawal from the program? And are we able to describe what those are if that's the case?
Not that I know of. I mean, at least not that I know of, in in the statute, other than just general penalties if you don't pay your tax bill.
And I would imagine it would be similar to class 9, where if somebody falls out of compliance, we can, claw back the amount that we should have received.
That's right, but then that would be different from a voluntary withdrawal. I think I understood the question to be a voluntary withdrawal versus, revocation by our office for failure for continued compliance. Yeah.
Another question we had: if a project is put into service in 2024, will the time it is in the program be prorated, or will it be in the program until 2034 with the option to recertify?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure, absolutely. If a project is put into service in 2024, will the time that it is in the program be prorated, or will it be in the program until 2034 with the option to recertify?
It would be, I believe it's the latter. I mean, like if your in-service date is your start date. So
yeah, it's your start date.
It's really the date that your expenditure is completed and the affordable units are leased up and rented out and folks are living in it. And that's year 1. And then you would get still a full 10 years benefit of the program and the option then to renew at the end of that period of time.
Okay.
But I also want to go back to the question about conditional approval. I mean, like any part 1 application that we approve, I mean, it's always effectively conditional, because we're taking what you're representing to us, right? If your plan was to make XY expenditure and that would be within the threshold, but once you've finished the project, it turns out you spent half of that money. Really it's, I would think any approval that we're giving on a part 1, and again, same with class 9, it's always conditional, like assuming that you meet all other requirements and you do what you're saying you're going to do. At best, we can say that it looks like you're on track for eligibility.
We also got a question about for new construction projects on vacant land. How will the starting point for an affordable community be determined for basis of the differential, since the year before will be a much lower assessment as vacant land? Michael, I think you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, and that was a good question, because obviously we're not giving a benefit to vacant land, no matter what the application says. What we're doing is we're going to look at the information we have and apply some or more than one approach to value on that vacant land to come up with an estimate of market value as what that would be if it was 100% completed and finished. And that affordability benefit will be applied to that number. It won't be applied to the vacant land. It won't be applied to a BOR number. It will be applied to what estimate of value we come up with. So even, for instance, if we have not received any tenant information or any income and expense information from the applicant at that point, we're still responsible to come up with value. We would proceed, and then once your application comes in, we would factor in what you sent us to apply the affordability benefit.
We did have a question about how the benefit of the program will be realized. So getting very specific, an existing class 9 building has, let's say, $1 million assessment in 2021. That assessment will be, if they're accepted, does that automatically get reduced by 25 to 35% for the next year? Obviously, there are many factors that go into calculating a property tax bill. And so a reduction of a particular percentage in an assessed value doesn't necessarily translate to the same reduction in tax bills. But do we have any other kind of guidance for folks about what kind of expectations they could have and with respect to the reduction in assessed value and what impact that has on taxes?
I'm just going to say, I'm reading that same question, Scott, and I think the questioner has a good understanding. It would actually apply for tax year 2022 for 23's taxes. The reduction would apply. Now, Scott, as you said, the bill itself is something different, but for the assessment, it would apply to 25 or 35%. Yep.
Okay. We did have a couple questions about timing on the application. So for part 1 of the class 9 application, it has to be filed before construction or substantial rehab begins. On a go forward basis, when are we asking people to fill out that application before construction or substantial rehab begins? Do we have a rough time period that we're kind of giving people to make sure that we have time to look at the application and get back to them on that?
Well, again, remember part 1 is not really where the rubber meets the road, as far as like, it's just you giving us your plan. And I wouldn't even necessarily say that it has to be completed before they break any ground. I mean, that's how we did class 9. It is different with this program because the statute doesn't have that requirement. And then we were trying to keep this modular for every kind of applicant. So there's going to be folks that did the construction in 2017. And they still have to fill out part 1 of the application. Obviously, they did that in construction before they filled the application. So in that context, part 1 is their opportunity to tell us, like, this is the basis on which I'm opting into this. I seek to opt into this program. This is the plan that I have. This is what I did, and this is the tier that I would like to be into. And then part 2 is now their way of substantiating all that information and just saying this is the current state of. As of 2022, this is how much of this is rented out. This is how much I'm collecting. So really, it all turns upon how soon you'd like to get the benefit and how soon you can get the benefit. Because if all you have is a plan, then all you can do is submit your part 1, and until that project is done, you're not going to be able to complete your part 2.
Okay. We've just got a couple more questions. What's the timing on our approving part 1 applications in time for folks to submit part 2 by March 31st? Are we kind of doing those on a sort of, rough amount of business days that we think we're turning those applications around?
You're actually not, we're not going to prevent somebody from filing a part 2 if we haven't got back to them on part 1. You are free if you've got the project done, then you can submit your part 1 and then immediately submit your part 2 in advance of hearing back from us.
Okay. And for folks who are representatives filling out the application online, how do we recommend they add the owner's signature?
They could share that link with them to access the DocuSign application. And they should be, through that, they should be able to access the application and scroll to the bottom to check the boxes and, click sign and submit.
Okay, and it looks like our last, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Scott, you could also, I believe they also should be able to just print out that page too, if a wet signature works better, and just have them fill it out hard copy and then scan it and upload it.
Okay, and so people are able to upload documents into the DocuSign application.
Correct. There's five different attachment links throughout the DocuSign application, but they all basically go to the same place, which is the end of the application. So that's what we're seeing on our end. And you'll see it too when you go to, every time you add an attachment, you can scroll to the bottom of your DocuSign document and you can see where it shows up. But yeah, they are, and there's unfortunately there's a 25 meg attachment limits, but again, if you run into that, that's where we would encourage you to just email what you couldn't attach to the inbox, because it's all going to go to the same place, but give us the information that we need to marry the documents back together, which is PIN number and project name.
Okay. And just a couple more questions. There's a question about an appeal process. If the office has determined that the property is not eligible for entrance into the program, is there another way to address that? And I think Christina had some thoughts on that.
I just said that, the appeal process that people are used to or have been used to in the past is the same appeals process that's in place. That the statute that carves out the, owner's ability to appeal is still there, was not amended or changed by this legislation. And it's same as always. Same bat channel, same bat time, if you will. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's tough to make these things humorous and fun. So I appreciate the effort, Christina. The question about the if the tax credit syndication resyndication has combined 15 buildings. So I think we're looking at, this is back to the sort of multi-building, multi-pin site question. If you have a combined 15 buildings, are only the buildings that have more than 7 units eligible, even though HUD or the state recognizes the scattered sites as one legal entity?
Yes, because this program is by building, not by necessarily project or by entity. And if it was, I think there wouldn't be a need for our different types of compliance and submittals and requirements if just being within one program automatically opted you into this program, which is not the way that it was designed. Although there are often, I think we're always open to ideas to have more synergy with the different types of programs and projects that are out there. I think there were some questions that were posed about some of the, certain city projects that have some overlap with this one, but it's not a perfect overlap, where they may have a 3-unit building that might be considered affordable for purposes of some city program, but it's not, wouldn't line up with our program. But it's, if there's a way to make that work through statutory changes, I think that's always something we'd be happy to discuss and work together on.
And so I think the last question we have is part 2, do you need a control number in order to submit?
No, we're the ones that issue the control numbers, but there could be a scenario where you have a small amount of time between your filing of part 1 and you don't want to wait to file part 2 because you have what you need. We don't want to be the hold up and say, because you didn't give us a control number, we're rejecting your part 2 application. We will issue those and we will get back to the applicants so that they'll have those for future submittals, but we don't want to make that a hold up.
Got it. Okay. I'm just dropping the link to the affordable housing webpage in the chat again. That takes care of the questions in the presentation. We do have another webinar next week for low affordability communities. It'll be the same time, Tuesday at 11 a.m. So please go to that website. The cookcountyassessor.com/affordable-housing is the URL. People can sign up for that webinar there. We also have the email address that Vince alluded to for folks that have follow-up questions. We are answering any emails that come into that inbox. We do want to make sure that folks are getting their questions answered and don't feel like they just have to come to this webinar to get this. We will be posting the slides and recording from this webinar very soon. We usually have that up within about a day. And with that, any concluding remarks, Vince, Christina, or Michael?
Great questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great program. I mean, hopefully, you know, we'll hopefully we'll actually see that in play. In theory, it's a really great program and meant to help a lot of families that really need affordable housing. As I think everybody has probably heard in the news, it's been a problem for quite a long time, and this was something that tried to address it and hopefully improve upon the Class 9 program that was established by county ordinance. So anyway,
Okay.
thanks for listening.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for listening. Thanks for all the interest and helping us kick the tires to make sure that this is implemented well.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.